I just recently moved from St. Louis to Nashville. My name's Mike Larimer. I'm in the Essbase development team. I just recently moved, and as part of the move, you pack up all your stuff and move your office. I work from home, and I came across this VHS tape about Essbase, and I'm going to play it for you, and then we'll get started with the session.
The Agile enterprise is constantly looking forward, revising plans and driving business performance. Problem solving is a collaborative process. Sharing information is essential. Analytical tools must keep pace with the speed of thought. Analyzing historical data is only part of the solution. The real key is the ability to quickly revise your plans in order to seize market opportunities. Analysis is not a backroom function. Line managers close to the action are expected to understand the business and make the necessary changes to drive improved performance. So what we decided was to create a product that would solve the functional requirement and reach out to end users with a familiar tool, a spreadsheet that they already knew. Essbase is a strategic platform for online analytical processing. To us, the customer is the front line of our company. They define the product, they define which direction we should take, they define how engineering should develop, they define the time frames for delivery, they basically define our company. We have built our technology in a way that absolutely goes seamlessly into an environment. They don't need to learn anything new. It enables their spreadsheet or their favorite front-end tool to do really powerful things with virtually no learning curve. Essbase solves the three major and fundamental problems of analysis in corporations today: sharing data, handling large volumes of data, and dealing with its complexity. We are constantly seeing new and larger applications being developed in our product, bigger and bigger commitments, more and more pull from the marketplace in terms of new features they'd like us to deliver or new services within our organizations. So we're seeing change, and we're seeing it at a very rapid rate. These challenges are not frightening, they're just exciting. It gives people the power to make decisions on the front line within their organizations. It's a very, very desirable product from that perspective. Essbase is the ultimate analytical machine. It's cool.
All right. How many people know who that was narrating that video? And who was it? So that was Jim Dorian. He was one of the founders of Arbor Software, the creators of Essbase. And who knows why this video was even made? This was the video they used in the roadshow when they took Arbor Software public and were recruiting investors. So this was a throwback video. So it's pretty cool. The reason I show it is because I was one of the original employees at Arbor, and it was an exciting time, and I feel that same excitement for Essbase in the cloud. It's a different team, and the product's been around a long time, but some of the features and some of the innovations that the Essbase team is doing today, they were doing back then. All those people you saw in that video were actual employees. They were developers and other people, so they didn't get actors to do that video, so that was pretty cool. All right, so I'm here to talk about the new capabilities within the Essbase Cloud. Let me switch to that. Let me mute this. Okay. There we go. So what's new in Essbase Cloud? Well, just about everything. So from the platform to the hybrid BSO, I know everyone's familiar with hybrid BSO. It's been out a couple of years now, but in the cloud it is new. There are some new things in it, and it's more full-featured than the on-prem version. There are some new tools for the cloud. There's CubeDesigner, SmartView has some new capabilities within it on the cloud. And then there's a whole bunch of different tools to help work with Essbase in the cloud. So before I go into the new features, it's good to understand the basis for what we as a development team had to do to get our product on the cloud. So Oracle has standards. They've got a group called the Oracle Public Cloud Group. And if you don't meet their standards, if you don't design your product to those standards, your product does not go on the cloud. And so we had to do things to Essbase to make it cloud ready. We had to basically some of the tools that we use on-prem did not fit those standards, so we had to rewrite some of the tools. Like EAS is not supported in the cloud. Essbase Studio is not supported in the cloud, and it's because they weren't secure enough. The protocol we use to communicate is not secure, so we're creating new tools to take their place. And then the last three items were more of, as a team, we wanted to focus on certain things. Our focus is on hybrid BSO. If you look at the innovations we're making, they are in the hybrid BSO engine. So a lot of those innovations I'm going to show you reflect that. Ease of use. As a team, we want to make Essbase easier to use, and I'll show you some things we're doing. We want to go back to the roots. Some of the things from that video they talked about, empowering the end user, bringing analysis closer to the line of business user. That's what we want to do. We're kind of getting back to our roots with Essbase Cloud. That's not to say we're not going to support enterprise class applications. Obviously you can. But we want to get Essbase in the hands of more people and have it used in more analytic situations. So we kind of look at it as another tool in an analyst toolkit to do their job. And then we're focusing on innovation. And I'll be honest, I've been with Essbase 25 years, and I'm seeing more innovation in cloud than I've seen in a long time. And I will say that Kumar and the development team are pretty fearless in terms of pulling back the curtain on Essbase, the code line, and improving things, upgrading the technologies that Essbase is running on, doing some new and interesting things. We've incorporated a relational database into our platform that's going to open up a whole world of possibilities of things we can do with Essbase and marry those two together. So it's an exciting time in the Essbase development team. All right, this slide probably you've seen 6 times today, but this is a representation of the platform on the cloud. And so the red circle is our J2EE platform. A lot of these things are net new innovations that you see here. So there's a job manager. So all of our operations like data load, calculation, cube building, they run as jobs asynchronously. We have a job manager that keeps track of that and coordinates those types of things. Things like a catalog. We're going to introduce ways to store, say, Excel files, either by user or by group or in public. So a lot of innovation going on in the platform, a lot of new and exciting things. And the key takeaway from that is we didn't just port Essbase on-prem. It is a new platform in the cloud. One example of something that's new and we're trying to simplify, so back to the ease of use, is the security within Essbase. Same functionality, you still have filter, cell level security, but the way you manage it is different in the cloud. We've simplified the number of roles. One of the other things, being part of the Oracle Public Cloud, is they want us to use other cloud services. So Essbase Cloud Service will take advantage of the Identity Cloud Service, which is the overall standard for Oracle Cloud products for security. Also in the platform, another innovation from the innovation category is this sandboxing and scenario management feature. Basically a sandbox, you take a baseline of data, you can create as many sandboxes. It's a virtual dimension within Essbase. We kind of hide it under the covers. You can then assign sandboxes to your users. They start with a base of data. They can make changes and do what ifs and not impact others. And then we've added a very lightweight scenario management for approval processes if that's what you want for your applications, and people can merge those sandboxes back into the base. And so that is a net new innovation at the platform level. And then these things are kind of down in the weeds, but these are net new. So we've changed the Essbase file directory structure. I mean, these are the kind of things we've thought about to improve the product. The reason we did that was what the developers call a robust restructure. So basically we've segregated the Essbase files so that when you do an outline change and you need to restructure, it gets put in, those files are in a separate directory. It reduces the chance of corruption, basically. So we've reduced that chance down to 0 by doing this. For the cloud, we've got idle cube detection at the platform level. It's configurable. It's configured at 15 minutes. So if someone creates a cube, it's going to be very easy to create cubes in the cloud, because I'm going to show you some tools that we have that make it easy. Somebody creates a cube, they leave it running, they go home. On-prem, it would run, right? It would run forever. On the cloud, resources are at a premium. I know everyone's paying for those resources. So idle cube detection, the platform will detect it hasn't been queried or used in 15 minutes or an hour or whatever you set it. It will shut it down, preserving your memory and CPU resources. We're going to give you application level configuration. Again, we want lots of cubes. Current on-prem Essbase, you have to manage the configurations at a global level. In the cloud, you can manage them at the application level. Just gives you that finer grain control over your Essbase cubes. And then finally, for long-term Essbase users, for a long time people have wanted to write back using MDX. We have MDX insert on the Essbase Cloud. So if you're an MDX developer and you want to create a write back application, MDX insert is the way you would do that on the cloud. All right, hybrid BSO, game changer, my opinion. We took the ASO algorithm and we combined, basically ASO and hybrid BSO use the same query engine now. And so we married that into the BSO capabilities. We've heard a lot of customers say they've had huge improvements in their cube performances. One of the key things with hybrid BSO that you're going to have to be aware of is solve order. So when you do things dynamically and you're in a multidimensional world, you want to know what order they're calculating, because the answer may not come out correctly if things get calculated before and after. Question?
I just want to know, in the cloud hybrid, you still have the option to make some hierarchy stored, so like...
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so solve order is important, and we're going to give you some tools to help understand the solve order as a user and manage it. And we've even integrated the advancements in speed that we've seen from the query algorithm into the calculator. So we know queries are important, we also know calculations are important, so we've married those two together in the cloud, and I'll show you some of that. And then we have some future innovations that are all hybrid BSO based. We're going to introduce aggregation weights So right now everything's 100%. If you want to have something aggregate up in 50%, you'll be able to do that. That's important in some financial applications. So those are all hybrid BSO innovations that you wouldn't get on-prem. That'll only be in the cloud. As I mentioned, we've married the BSO engine into the calculator. We're also trying to make the calculator a little more user-friendly and forgiving. For those that are longtime Essbase developers, when you start making things members dynamic, you run into this calc lock block warning message. It basically wants you to increase your cache, and you had to manage that yourself. The engine's getting smarter now in the cloud, so it's going to know that it needs more cache, and it's going to adjust itself. So that setting is deprecated in the cloud version of Essbase. On the ease of use side in the calculator, anybody who uses xref or partitions know that you have to create a location alias, and that those functions use the location alias. In the cloud, we've enhanced those calc functions so that you can just use the application name and the cube name instead of a location alias. It's going to use your identity to go make that query. So whatever you're logged in as, you don't have to give it a different username to go make that query. So that's an enhancement. We've also made the error messages more descriptive, and in some cases we don't error off. So something like an at prior function in the Essbase calculator, if you ask for a member that doesn't exist. So if I'm on January of 2015 and I ask for or I ask for at prior, and there is no at prior, I'm the first member in a dimension, usually you get an error. Going in the cloud, it'll just say missing. So we're hoping that if you don't have to keep testing, if January do this, if not do that, it'll be very helpful in your script writing. And then we've introduced this concept of calc trace, and I know a lot of people have already been to other sessions and seen some of this, but that's also an enhancement where you can define a POV in your script that you want to trace the actual calculation dependencies, and you can either get that output to a log on the server, and then you can look at it in total, or from SmartView, we give you the ability to highlight a cell, run the calc, and then see the trace for that POV. And I can demonstrate that at the end. We've been touting a lot about our CubeDesigner and our creating a cube from Excel. So that's basically it. We allow you to take a table of data and with one click send it up to the cloud, and it'll create a cube, and you can then modify it and adjust it. If we have time, I'll give a demo of that. In addition to that, we also have what we call a DBX, Design by Example workbook, or sometimes called an application workbook. And it is a self-describing way of creating a cube. You can basically define the dimensions, the members, the calculations, the data. You can add documentation sheets. It's a really nice way to self-describe an Essbase application, and it's a quick way to spin up a cube. CubeDesigner is an extension to SmartView. I will say that all of the features that are in the CubeDesigner utilize the new REST API that the cloud has. So the gallery basically leverages that catalog concept I talked about in the platform. The view jobs utilizes that job manager that I talked about in the platform. Those are all accessible via a REST API. And as I mentioned, EAS is no longer available for the cloud, and so we have our own web-based UI for doing more of the enterprise type operations for managing an Essbase environment. So we've got database management, outline editor. We have migration capabilities to take your on-prem into the cloud. We've got administration capabilities like creating and assigning roles to users and such. So, and then we have a bunch of tools, a bunch of utilities, and these are all downloadable from the web UI. The first one is what we call the LCM Import, LCM Lifecycle Management. All this is we package up your existing Essbase Cube, whether it's on-premise or in the cloud, put it in a package, what we call a package. It's just the artifacts from that application. And then you can then upload it to the cloud using our CLI tool, our command line interface, and it will open the package, create the application, and get it up and running. And that package can contain filters, security filters, it can contain load rules, calc scripts, it can, all of the Essbase artifacts. And then, as I mentioned, there's a command line interface. So this is our direction to replace MaxL. MaxL also is not secure for cloud-based operations. It's a TCP/IP-based tool. We understand that everyone has hundreds or thousands of MaxL scripts, so we do have a way to run the old MaxL scripts using this CLI tool, but our direction is to hopefully migrate and have parity between MaxL and this new CLI tool. The CLI tool is an HTTP-based tool. Yes?
When you say run on the server, is that on the Essbase server? Or is there...
Yeah, so the difference for MaxL, to be able to run MaxL in the cloud, is it's really it does three things have to happen. You have to take your MaxL and push it to the server, and then the CLI will run that MaxL on the server, on the OCA Essbase server, and then you download the MaxL results to interpret it. That's the only way we can run MaxL. It has to run on the server itself. On the cloud server. Yes. Yep.
Just a quick question about the command line interface, and it seems that you have to call it before each command every time. The same thing is true with EPM Automate. Is there a reason that there isn't, like, you don't get into an environment of SCLI where you just type commands? Why you have to keep calling it each time?
You are logged in, aren't you?
So your question is, why do you need to put the prefix each time?
Yeah. Why are you into an environment?
So why didn't we create a shell? We could do that. So this is a little bit of a technical. I'll try to answer as much as possible. REST API is stateless. Okay. Each time you run the command, you don't get a session. Okay, so what we do is when you log in first time, we log in, get the authentication, and EPM Automate, what it does is it takes the token and stores it in a secret place in your command line. And each time you run it, it is like a separate request. And then it takes the password, under the cover it passes both the username and password every time. So you don't get a session each time. So I don't know whether I'm answered your question, but each one is like a separate request by itself, and each one needs to send the username and password. That's one of the reasons they did it this way.
Okay, like I mentioned, there are REST APIs. The REST API library is expanding every week. We'd like to have a full-featured API at some point. I'm not sure what that point's going to be. I kind of stole this from our development website, but these are the sections that they're working on right now, and some of them are fully done and some of them are in progress. So you can see things like their Grid API, Jobs API. So these are some of the things from a REST standpoint you'll be able to do in the future. And I know that's really small, you can't see it, but that's kind of an example of what the REST calls look like. Oh, question.
You mentioned the EPM Automate. EPM Automate, is that the same, could it be the same as the CLI? Or are they completely different?
They're different. Yeah, the EPM Automate is for the EPM Cloud, and our command line is called ESSCS. They're different, yeah. Yeah, because they talk to different cloud services.
All right, let me escape out of there. Are there any questions before I go into a demo?
One question, you mentioned the file structure. Does that mean that we have access to the file structure?
Yeah, so the difference between the Essbase, the OAC Essbase and say PBCS or some of the other cloud products is this is a PaaS, platform as a service, so you have access to the box. Whereas in SaaS, it's all completely managed and locked down, so you can't get to the files. We have in our UI ways to get to, let's say, in the database directories of your Essbase applications, so that's built into the UI. But as an administrator, you can SSH into the box, and it's a Linux box, so you can do whatever. Now, you can't install software on that box, but you can certainly copy files and move files and whatnot. So, all right. Oh, yes.
Can you connect from the new interface from Analytics Cloud to PBCS cubes or PBCS cubes?
Kumar, do you know the answer to that? PBCS cubes from our box.
Analytics Cloud interface to PBCS cubes or PBCS cubes?
You cannot access. So the SaaS is highly controlled, and for all practical purposes, you don't even know that it's a Essbase under the cover. So they want to strictly control the access through the application interfaces.
But if a customer owns Analytics Cloud, PBCS or FCCS or whatever that may be, suppose I heard that you'll be able to access that and use PBCS, data visualization, to access those cubes, or is that?
So to repeat the question, let me say it again. So PaaS and SaaS are different. In PaaS, you own the machine, so you get access to everything. And when you come to Essbase as a cloud, you completely manage the Essbase. In SaaS, under the cover, Essbase is running, so only interfaces are what they expose. You don't get access to the machine. You're asking how does DB works against EPM Cloud. So they have something called an ADM driver. So EPM Cloud is one of the sources to BI supports close to 300 sources. One of the source would be EPM Cloud, and they are working on it. I don't know when it is live. It should be sometime. It's either already out or sometime this summer. So DB then can talk to EPM Cloud, but it doesn't talk to Essbase directly. It goes through the planning. Mainly because planning stores data both in Essbase and also on relational. They marry the two and give you the data back.
And if you want to export a PBCS cube and put it into Essbase Cloud, you can take the EPM Automate export, and using the CLI tool, you can import it into Essbase Cloud, and that would work. Okay. So let's, no more PowerPoints. Let's do a little live demo. So I understand this is a dangerous thing to do. Nobody ever gives live demos, so I'm going to go for it. All right, so this is a table of data. And you can see I've got quantity and price. This is an example of, let's say I've gotten this table of data from my system. I know it's quantity and price, but as part of that of the process of spinning up a cube, I'd like to add some calculated measures as well. So let's take advantage of the power of Essbase a little bit. So that the way you can do that is you can define a couple of headers extra to the table, which I've done, and one's called revenue, And using Essbase member formula syntax, Essbase calc script syntax, it's basically going to create the measure and put a member formula on that measure automatically as part of the algorithm. So I've got two new measures called revenue and average price. One has a really simple formula. One uses the average function and skip both and all. That's just the Essbase syntax. So let's just see what happens if I go ahead and say transform data in the CubeDesigner. It should prompt me to log in. So good, I've got connectivity here. And it's just going to use the name of the workbook and the sheet as the name of the application in Cube. You can change that if you want. I'm just going to say run. And it says the cube already exists. So one of the tasks in CubeDesigner, so we're empowering someone to spin up a cube themselves and destroy and create and destroy and create and basically generate their own cubes. So one of the tasks is to be able to delete your own cubes. And in another demo, I had already done this, so I'm going to delete this cube right from the toolbar. And then we'll try it again. So that deleted that cube. I'm going to go ahead and run this again. And what it's doing, you see down there in the lower, uploading the application workbook to the cloud. So it sent this small table up to the cloud. It's now creating the app, creating the cube, doing the setting, setting the Essbase settings. It's creating a hybrid BSO cube by default with all of the upper levels as dynamic. And it's done. If I wanted to, I could look at the job viewer. Let's look at the job viewer. So you can see I've done a bunch of stuff already. This is my own local job log. We don't call it job manager. It's a little different than what's in the web UI. The web UI is the total record of truth. You can't delete jobs from that UI. From the CubeDesigner, you can. So if you think about designing a cube, how many times you make a mistake, right? And you get errors, you correct it. You get errors, you correct it. What we're going to allow you to do from CubeDesigner is to highlight certain jobs and just say delete and get rid of them. So all those errors, you don't have to keep them in your queue. You get a little unwieldy. So that's one of the benefits from the CubeDesigner job viewer. All right, so let's go see what the cube looks like. So I'm going to, the other thing in the CubeDesigner is there's this analyze button. And what's nice about the analyze button is it knows what server you just sent that to. So it finds the private connection in SmartView. It saves you a few clicks in SmartView, navigational clicks. So let's go ahead and look at what that cube looks like and say ad hoc analysis. And so that table, it created 4 dimensions. One of the dimensions was measures, and that number looks weird. So why is that number 49 billion in revenue, and why is price 584? Well, because by default, it aggregates things. And as I mentioned earlier, the solve order, the revenue needs to get created first and then aggregated up by the other dimensions. So we've given you some tools in SmartView to help debug the situation. One of them is if you highlight the cell and you click cell information, this is the order that number got calculated. So there's 4 dimensions. So it basically rolled up products, rolled up location, rolled up cohort, and then calculated the revenue last. And that's not what I wanted. So how do I fix that? The revenue should have been calculated first. Well, right from SmartView, we're going to allow you to change the solve order and update the outline as fast as that. So now that number looks more reasonable. Question? Well, this is the user creating their own cube. So we're going to allow the users to basically design. This is a power user creating their own cube. We're going to allow them to design and manage that cube. Since they created it from the table, we're going to give them some tools to help them basically modify the cube. Yeah, certainly you can control whether a user can even create a cube. They have to have the rights to do that. But if they've created the cube from scratch, we're allowing them to change the properties of the cube.
Yeah, so this user has to be a power user.
Okay, so that's one of the cool new features is figuring out, okay, what is the solve order? How did that value get created? And being able to adjust it. A couple of other things that we've got. So let's say that's great, but now I want to do some what if on that cube. Using the application workbook or the DBX concept, you can then layer in dimension by dimension on top of that existing cube that I just created some more functionality. So in this case, I'm going to add a what if dimension. And the way I do that is using the DBX syntax, the design by example syntax in CubeDesigner. I've defined one dimension. I want it to be a regular dimension and dense. And I want it to have two members called optimistic and pessimistic. And I want a calculation to happen after this cube gets created. So when I add this dimension, it's going to put the existing data in the top member called what if, and I want optimistic to adjust quantity by 10%, I want it to lower pessimistic by 10%, and so on and so forth. Basically, all the user has to do then is go to Build Cube in CubeDesigner, say update the cube and retain the data because I want to add to the data that's there. I want to modify the cube, and I tell it to run the calculation script that's contained within this workbook. I click Run. It sends it off as a job. You can see that it's running with this hourglass in the View Jobs command. I'm going to switch back over to the first workbook and query. And when that modification's done, it's going to prompt me with a dialog. In the DBX workbook, yes, there are certain tabs that have to be there and define the cube. Okay, so it's finished. So now in my query, if I hit refresh, it added the what if dimension. All these numbers are the same because that is the baseline where I just sent that data. If I double click on what if, you can see optimistic is now, the quantity is higher than where I started, the pessimistic is there, and it's a normal Essbase cube. So it's that easy to start with some data. Question? There will be drill through capabilities. The drill through has a setup to it to tell it where to go to get that source detail. But one of the cool things you can do, if you start with a table, if I can go back to that here. If you start with a table, and let's say one of the columns you didn't put in your cube, but you want to drill back and get more detail, you could make this original table your drill through target as well. So you'll be able to drill through back to a SQL source, an Excel file. I'm trying to think what all the others are, but yes. It is in the next release of Cloud, which I don't know if I'm allowed to say when that is, but
Sorry.
106, when is that?
It's August, September.
Yeah, so drill through is not in the version of Cloud that's out right now. It'll be in the next patch or whatever we're calling that. Okay, so pretty powerful stuff, pretty easy. Yes, question? Yes. It is in the cloud. Very good question. So one of the things that happens when you build the cube, when you say build cube, is it actually creates the artifacts on the server. So this calc script, if I go to calculate, you can see that the file name was called alloc, and it's actually a calc script on my server now. The workbooks can contain 1 to many calc scripts. I've seen as many as 80. The other interesting thing is you can have them execute automatically at build cube time, or you can create some and just put them out on the server and not have them execute as well. Okay, a couple other quick features from a Smart View standpoint. We have the capability to audit writebacks from the Smart View now. Let me go ahead and connect. And the audit data is kept in our platform. So here's a cube, and basically the audit capability is now a setting, and in the DBX workbook there's a settings tab, and within the tab you can set all of these things for a cube. I spoke you can now have an application level configuration file. The audit trail has a command called audit trail, and you can audit the data changes, you can audit metadata changes, or you can audit both, and they'll be stored in the platform itself. So now if I go back to this query and I say more, there's a new Smart View item called audit trail. And for this cube, I've got I as a user, I've given a few demos today. I've done some updates. I'm going to go ahead and update this cell again, say 1,000, and submit data. And if I come down here and scroll down, it's added that to the audit. I can then look at all the audits, or all the updates that I've made just by clicking the button here. It creates a new sheet, creates a table, time, what was done by whom. So that's new. You can also even put a comment. So I've just updated that by 1,000. Now I want to comment it. Using linked objects, I can put a cell note there, save it back, and if I refresh, the comment is now part of that audit trail. So that's the audit. We also have some new tools to help understand calc tracing and other things, but I know it's late on last session. Any questions? Anything?
If your org dimension was built from a table previously, how do you pull a table results into this environment?
So the only thing we audit is lock and send and whatever updates users are making. We don't audit data load.
Not for auditing, but to build an outline. And if you have a brand new cube and you need to build a 25,000 member org dimension,
Yes.
how do you pull that in here?
Well, you can certainly still use load rules to build your dimensions. So that's part of the web UI. I've got some DBX workbooks where basically I leverage the power of Excel, and Excel has some external data capabilities. So you can go out and grab the data from a table, populate your workbook. I've got some examples of that, and it basically would fill in that 25,000 users into your workbook for you, and that can be refreshed if you save it. So there's some cool examples of that. That's kind of the neat benefit of being able to use Excel to do some cube development, is to leverage a lot of the power of Excel. Excel has a lot of cool capabilities. So, and then we give you the web UI to do more enterprise. You know, once you get the cubes developed, you can manage them in a normal Essbase fashion using the web tools.
How can you load data into the cube itself
Without using Excel? Yeah, so like I said, you can use load rules. So there is a load rule editor. Kumar, you want to talk about?
So basically, everything you can do in on-premise, you can do it. We have a way to upload the load rules to the cloud if we already have a load rule, or we have a load rule editor. So the DBX way of doing it is we don't want to expose users to complexity of creating a load rule. We create that automatically for you based on what you specified there. But if you are willing to create it, there is a load rule editor. You can go and edit it, and then you can submit a job that runs either a dimension build or a data load. We support both text-based as well as SQL-based data load and dimension build. And all that them can be automated using CLI and whatnot. So it's pretty much, we have everything.
Hey, Mike, you know, on the roadmap, so right now there's no calc syntax editor, right?
Yes.
Roadmap, I assume there is one on the roadmap, but other than that, are there any enhancements like over in calc and things like templates, macros, any items like that?
Currently, there are not any Calc Manager-like plans for Essbase Cloud.
Yeah, so we will definitely have a better editor for CalScript, creating filters, creating partition definitions and whatnot, where you can will do an autofill and you can look up member functions and whatnot. But in terms of templates, we would love to hear from you what exactly you have in mind. So one of the things we are thinking of is shipping a lot of predefined gallery templates. We can ship a lot of dimension libraries, calculation function libraries, and whatnot. If you think there are some cool CalScript that we can ship, you let us know, because we do, unlike PBCS, we do support runtime substitution variable. If you think we can abstract some calculation for certain runtime substitution variable, we are happy to do that. That's the direction we'll go.
So, does that mean we're going to have runtime prompts?
We already have that. Yeah.
From SmartView, yes.
Yeah.
Quick question. In the file that you just uploaded to the metadata,
Yes.
maybe you would some of the other columns, what are the properties, so the properties associated with the member?
Okay. Yeah, so let's open up an example. So I've got some very basic examples that come out of the box with the cloud, just to help you get an understanding of what the DBX syntax looks like. So as a user, I can start from scratch, or I can start from a template, and there's a wizard that comes with CubeDesigner, and it's this button here. Let me minimize this. It opens up blank. So basically, the wizard understands the contract of the DBX design. So it understands that these tabs are called a certain thing, and there are fields in certain places, and it will read those fields. We call that our contract, and the server understands the same thing. So you could certainly build this by hand, but we give you tools to help build this. So basically, the wizard, you're going to say, read from this sheet and populate the wizard. So there's a button down here called From Sheet. It went and read every sheet in that workbook. And so there are 4 or 5 different tabs that got populated with the information. So I could come in here and add another dimension, dim2, and say to sheet. And it added dim2 to the bottom, gave it a sparse dimension. The server understands that the dimensions need to come before the attribute dimensions and things like that, so that's not a problem. But that's how easy it is to actually modify a dimension. Not only did it add it here, but it created a new sheet called a dim sheet, because it knows that a dimension needs to be defined. So if I go here to dim2, I could then say, let's say dim2, I want to add a few members, so I'll just copy this down, and I'll just call it member 1, and use Excel to just auto-populate. So I've created a bunch of new members for that dimension. Some of the properties that go along, by default, the storage is dynamic or stored. The default, if it's a blank, it's a stored member. The consolidation is plus minus, multiply, divide. I can add more properties, dim field, build fields, to a dimension. Let's say I want to add an alias. Let's add 2 aliases. I just select what other properties I want to give, maybe a comment. And I say to sheet. And it modified the template for me so that I can fill it in. In the future, we're going to enhance this to where when you click on a cell, it'll give you the options of what the storage parameters are. It's all in the documentation. And right now it's very cryptic. This is based on load rule technology. So it's basically all it's doing is creating a load rule for you and allowing you to populate the data and the load rule layout, if you're familiar with load rules in Essbase. And so that syntax applies right now. We know we want to enhance it. We know it's cryptic, but in this version, it's, for example, an X means a dynamic calc.
One follow-up question. That's a great explanation. Very appreciated. But this is a silly question, but a power user. How do you really define a power user? Because I cannot see it in my users.
Okay.
So I just want to know what you define as a power user. Do you define a power user more like an administrator, or do you think you define a power user as someone in finance that is in financial planning and analysis and wants to do, has a skill set?
It would be whoever has the skills to develop an Essbase cube. So whoever develops the cubes today. So if it's an admin or a developer, I'll tell you, when I started with Essbase was a departmental solution. It was a finance person that would define the cube, and they defined it within Excel way back in the day. So, I mean, it's definitely not outside the realm of a finance person being able to develop a cube, at least in my opinion. I mean, every company's different, but they're in Excel, something they're comfortable with. Obviously, there is some learning curve to understand dimensionality in Essbase, and that's why we have this gallery concept where a lot of people learn from examples. I know I do. You download something, you see how somebody else has done it, and you modify it. So we understand that we need to have a lot of examples to help get people up to speed with Essbase. But that's basically where we see that.
Is there a wizard to create workbook from existing output?
There are tools to create this workbook, yes. There is a utility. It's called the DBX utility, and that's what this workbook is based. It's a design by example, so you can point it at any Essbase server on-prem or cloud, and it will create this workbook for you from an existing Essbase application.
Is there any other interface like EAS or any web interface other than this?
Yeah, so there is a web interface.
Does it have a name, or is that just the overall interface?
Just a Essbase Cloud UI.
It's the Essbase Cloud UI, yeah. Yeah, so this is the Cloud UI for Essbase. You can see that the green dot means these cubes are running. I've shown some examples using these other cubes, but 15 minutes must have passed, so it shut them down. Yeah, so there is a job manager. Again, you saw this from the CubeDesigner. It's also available here. You go home to the home button. This is the security management. So I've got users with roles defined. All of the utilities can be downloaded. So the command line utility that I showed in the PowerPoint can be downloaded from here. The lifecycle management tool, that DBX export utility can be downloaded. There's documentation under Academy. So yeah, so this is the face of Essbase Cloud, is this web front end. Yes?
No, you buy by, it's not a SaaS, it's a PaaS. You buy a capacity. You buy by OCPU and you can use whatever you want. You can put a database there. You can put cloud storage. You can provision it for DV, Essbase. That's how it works. So you buy a compute power, and then you can provision any one of the PaaS services. So you would buy. So we don't have a UAT or dev. It's up to you how you want to use those capacity.
So with the intelligent error handling, what if I just misspell the word actuals? Is it not going to flag that?
It will.
Okay.
Yeah, things like that. It's the functions. Yeah, we basically are trying to eliminate null references. So if you in your function you're referencing something that's null, it should be missing. It shouldn't penalize you for that. But it'll definitely flag misspellings and.
Where did the script that you created out?
Script would be you go to the cube. It was under orders, right? Yes, right. So they're context sensitive. So at the global level, if you click the refresh button, that's the global, and then the tiles will light up whether you're at an application. Some will light up, some won't, and then down at the very cube level, you have access to do everything at the cube level. Yep. Yes.
Is there something you get to pick and choose something from PBCS, or can you just take a whole snapshot and it'll go all?
Currently, it is the whole snapshot. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Is that coming just through smart view, or is there ways to drill through the space to reporting?
So, what do you mean by Essbase to reporting? Can you?
We have a report, like management reporting.
Mm-hmm.
You have a report in Essbase to drill through like detail.
Yeah. So okay. So when we define drill through, you have to define a connection to an external data, and that could be a CSV file, an Excel file, could be a database, or could be a BI. Eventually, we want to define any REST API based service. And then once you define a connection, we define a data source, and then you do the drill through the data source. Yeah. So you have to build that in the web UI, and then you go to the smart view to experience that. That's right. So maybe we can talk offline. I want to understand more what you're asking.
Okay, I think that's time. So thanks everybody for attending.